May the words of my mouth and the meditations of our hearts be always acceptable to you, O God, my strength, my Redeemer. Amen. Are you all, as the folks that are in the room here, are you all familiar with the story of Anansi the spider? You know Anansi? Anansi the spider? He's an Ashanti folk hero, basically. One of the great folklore figures in Western African traditions. And there are many stories about Anansi, but the one that comes to my mind is about the time that God approached Anansi and gave him a bag containing all the wisdom and all the knowledge of the entire world. And that was to go and spread the knowledge throughout the world. But Anansi coveted the bag of knowledge and wanted to keep it all for himself. And so he found the tallest tree, and he climbed up to the tallest tree, and as he climbed to keep the bag for himself, he dropped the bag. And the wind caught it, and the wind blew all of the knowledge all around the whole world and scattered it across the whole world so that nobody had all the knowledge and wisdom that they needed, but everybody had a little bit of knowledge and wisdom. It reminds me that none of us know everything. None of us should know everything because we are made to need each other. Another great folklore tradition is that of the Hebrew people. The Hebrew people who tell the story of when God created humanity. God created humankind and then said, you know what, it's not enough because I don't want humankind to be alone. And so God took humankind and divided it up into the Ish and the Isha and made us so that we need each other. We need relationship and community. And I think if we want to see an example of somebody who exhibits for us that it's okay not to know everything, it's okay to have some knowledge and wisdom, but it's also okay to learn from others' knowledge and wisdom. I think Jesus just gave us that story in the gospel. Jesus, who clearly, the Son of God, God incarnate himself, and so we want to have the tendency to say, well, surely God knows everything, so Jesus should know everything. He shouldn't need to be taught a lesson by anybody. And he goes and he teaches the Pharisees and his disciples about what defiles you and about how we don't need to stick rigidly to traditions. It's more important how we speak and how we do. And so he's pretty wise. But then he comes across the Canaanite woman, this Canaanite woman who comes to him for help, and Jesus turns her away and says, I haven't come for you. You're not among my people. And she calls him up short. She reminds him that even she, a Canaanite woman, she's a child of God too. She was a creature of God as well and deserves to be loved just as much. And Jesus stops and realizes he was wrong. And he blesses her too. Even Jesus learned something from her. And being a Canaanite woman in that society, she would have been a pretty low status. She would have been somebody that the Pharisees and even Jesus' disciples would have said, you can't learn anything from her. She's a Canaanite and a woman. You're a rabbi. You can't learn anything from her. But Jesus was willing to hear her and willing to change his behavior because he learned from her. So I think if Jesus can do that, certainly we can all do that as well. Certainly we can realize that I've had this image in my mind all week long of us being like puzzle pieces, right? Each of us is like a puzzle piece. We have our own little image, our own little unique shape that's just ours, and we're a complete piece just by ourselves. But you don't see the whole picture if you don't have all of the pieces brought together. And so in that way, I think this is one of the big reasons why we are the church, why we're called to be the church. So I can take the knowledge and wisdom I have, and you can take the knowledge and wisdom you have, and you can take the knowledge and wisdom you have, and we can put it together. We can hear from each other, learn from each other. Because some of us are teachers, and some of us are healers, and some of us are builders, and some of us are tend to the young, and some of us tend to the old, and some of us are compassionate fighters for justice, and some of us are quiet counselors of the soul, and none of us are perfect at all of it. But together, we can be the church that we couldn't be alone. There's lots of opportunities we have to use that. To call your attention to a few coming up, there's an event coming up in a couple of weeks where you'll be invited to participate in how can we be community in respectful dialogue with each other in the midst of political diversity. A political diversity that threatens to actually pull us apart and tell us we can't learn anything from each other, but I challenge us to say we can learn from each other, and we should learn from each other. So I hope you'll look for that and consider joining this. How do we be community in the midst of political difference? We are doing work on racial justice. And how can we learn and grow together about being a more racially just community around us? And we're doing work on mental health care in our communities, in our neighborhoods, among our families. And there's a lot of work that needs to be done to improve the mental health care around us. And we can only do it if we can share the knowledge that we all have together with each other. And so I commend that to us. I commend that to us as a model for being the church, a model where we can be like the Canaanite woman who's willing to share what we know and speak the truth, but to also be like Jesus, to be willing to hear when somebody has something to share us and be willing to learn and grow. If we can be like both of them, then we can accomplish some amazing things as the church together. And for that reason, I say, thanks be to God. Amen.